Welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. The views and opinions expressed on Stories of Amazing Grace are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Madison Church of Christ or the producer of this program. Enjoy. Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Dexter Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. Some of you are listening by way of radio through the facilities of World Christian Broadcasting. Thank you for that. And for our live audience, glad that you're here. Our theme scripture always comes from Romans 8:38 through 39. I'm sure that nothing can separate us from God's love. Not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Well, our guest tonight is David Johnson. Just happens to be a brother-in-law of mine. He drove 2.5 hours to be here. He's a best-selling author. I don't know why he didn't take his private jet, but he drove instead in his Ford F-150. You've heard his intro about David for the past 2 Sundays, but I'm going to read most of it again here, so bear with me. Our YouTube audience has not heard it before, so this will be the first time for them. David Johnson has worked in helping professions for over 35 years. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a former youth minister, the director of the David Johnson's Chorus, and the best-selling author of the Tucker series of books on Amazon, having sold over 500,000 self-published copies. David has written 9 novels. He does not keep a stockpile on hand, but they are available on Amazon.com. And of course, if you already have one of his books, he'll be happy to sign it tonight. His books challenge people's view of the poor, highlighting their incredible resilience and incredible heart. His wife, Brenda, is with him tonight. He has 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren. I'm going to start off by showing a video I shot last December in Dresden, Tennessee, of the David Johnson course, and then you'll meet David Johnson. Watch this.
David and I were very good friends in high school, and some way or another he manages to put that aside when he's a choral director.
We're running a little bit behind this evening because of difficulties with getting the trailer hooked up to the truck, and so we're like 15 minutes behind schedule, so I'm feeling a little pressured right now. I conducted a concert with a high school choir on this same stage. First time would have been 1975.
I was a part of a project graduation committee meeting back in 1998. And we were having the meeting where we were all gathered together to come up with speakers for the event, and the usual, oh, well, we can get this sports figure, or we can get this politician. And I just had this idea that high school was not all about becoming someone like that. There were a lot of special things that happened during high school years to form us. And one of those things that was important to me was the chorus.
It was at first just something to do a project graduation for and get back a bunch of people together and a lot of old friends. And I don't know, when we hit those first 4 notes that he gave us that night, it was just like sticking your finger into a plug on the wall, because it was like all those years erased and you were in high school again. And the look of astonishment on everyone's face was unbelievable.
When you first get in the chorus, you think it's all about getting the notes right, singing properly. There's more to it. You get the magic once you have sung with us for a while, and you realize that there's heart to it. And if you can't sing with your heart, you haven't found that magic.
He's a good director, and he's precise. He wants it done right, but that's why we sound like we do.
Sometimes he gives us a stink eye, but we need it. Then if we listen to him, we don't mess up. So, that it's only through him that we are as good as we are.
You are the wife of the choral director.
Yes, I am.
How does that work out?
It works out good. We get along really good. He never gives me the stink eye like he does some people.
Eileen, Keith Gallimore, Linda.
Oh, I love their Christmas program. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. We come every year.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome David Johnson. Come on up. Have a seat, sir. Glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, when you got the call about reuniting the chorus again, was that a surprise? Were you reluctant? What was the deal?
So that was completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
Completely out of the blue. There was a movie around that time, but maybe before that, Mr. Holland's Opus,
Right.
which, was the story of that kind of a scenario. And so my first response to Gail, when she asked about that, I said, well, yeah, I'd be interested in that, but what if it doesn't sound good? I mean, I hadn't been with these people in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, that's what I would expect you to say. Because if it's not going to be right, we're not going to do it, kind of a thing. So, and like Tom said, when we first met that first time and we all got on the stage and I gave pitches to the four parts and they created a chord, it was one of the most remarkable moments in my life because suddenly they were back in high school and I was 20 years younger. It was just amazing.
How many years did you teach chorus in high school?
I was there for 9 years.
9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the same high school that you taught at, which you went back to for this concert, and you do that every year?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because our base of operation really, if you think about it, is Dresden.
Right.
Okay, but we have people that come from probably a 50-mile radius to be a part of the group. But that's where we practice every week is in Dresden. So we always have a concert there.
And where are some places that you perform?
Well, we've performed many times at the Biltmore House in Asheville, North Carolina. We're asked to come there at Christmas and sing in their winter garden. If you've ever been to the Biltmore House, it's a beautiful place.
It sounds good in there, too.
It's an unbelievable sound. It really is. We make it a special point to be of service with what we do. And so we've been to St. Jude Hospital many times. We've been to Le Bonheur Children's Hospital many times. We go to the VA hospital many times. And so we make a point, and we've been to the VA hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. We've been to Shriners Hospital in St. Louis. We've sung in Washington, D.C. We've sung in the Shepherd Center in close to Atlanta, Georgia, where people who are victims of spinal injuries go to rehab themselves, and then all points in between.
Some camera people here accuse me of being too micromanaging, too strict sometimes, too picky.
Yes.
Do you have that same thing as a choral director, perhaps?
If you ask the people that you talk to on there, yes, absolutely. If you're going to do anything, you're going to do it well. There's no point in just doing things haphazardly. Anything worth doing is worth doing well, whatever it is. That's my book. And so, yeah, I will throw temper tantrums in rehearsals, and I will yell at them and talk to them like they were children. But it's all for a purpose, and they all get it. So, yeah, so you guys pay attention. Okay? Pay attention.
Gail, is that her name?
Yes.
She shared a story with me, or someone did. I just wouldn't think this about you, that I think you were we're just at the Biltmore,
Okay.
and the bus was there, and you had a certain time for people to be there on the bus, and she wasn't there, and you left. The bus left without her. Is that what happened?
Yes. Tell
me about that.
We were staying in a motel, and then it was our first trip to the Biltmore, actually. And so I really had no idea what to expect. This was like, first time there, and so what's expectations of us and all that kind of stuff. They had given me a schedule that I anticipated you keep the schedule, right? So I told my group, we'll leave the motel at this time, go to the Biltmore house. And so time came, a person wasn't there. I waited maybe a couple of minutes.
Sure.
And then we left.
All right. Has she forgiven you for that?
You'll have to ask her about that.
Okay.
I don't know. I think she did.
All right. That's enough of the chorus, I guess. Let's move on to some your family background a little bit. I know a little bit about your family since I married your sister. And by the way, did you get along as brother and sister? I heard that maybe you were the brother that did not get along.
Absolutely not. No. How many times can we do this? It'll take a long time to talk about all that part of my life.
Yeah.
It was so sad.
Is she a little
so
bossy?
tragic.
Is she a little bossy sometimes?
She was the oldest one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so she's the oldest sister.
I know where you're coming from.
Right? See what I'm saying? So that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
That's the way it was. And I was the objectionable one. So we clashed. Yeah, we did.
Okay. Let's take a look at some photos here. This is a threesome. You're in the back, I assume, on the chair. This is you, correct? Can you recognize yourself? That is you.
Not exactly, but I like that I'm up on a throne. I like that.
And this is Steve on the left and Marta on the right. And this is another threesome here. This is before the other brother came along, named Paul.
Uh-huh.
And we have the family at the table here, I believe. Yes, this is Dad in the background and your mother. And again, the three people again. And then we have David. Now this, do you know what year this was? Because when you comment about your writing and in your book, you talk about, I believe, your teenage years of people you met. I'm going to guess
It's got to be, I'm trying to figure
13 or 14.
I'm trying to even figure out where that is, and I really can't figure out where
that is. You,
is
though,
actually.
right?
That's
Okay.
me, all right. And young people, that's a telephone that I'm holding. And you put that to your ear, and you would talk in it. So that's what that is that I'm holding there. So I'm guessing that's probably 1970, 69, something like that. Be my guess.
All right. And the next one here is your dad, Willie.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if he could see what you're doing now?
Yeah, you know,
maybe he is.
Yeah, right. I mean, one of the, before my chorus does a concert, we always gather and we just have a few moments of quiet time, and I give some final thoughts. And I told them at one of our concerts this past year, I said, so is there someone in your life that you wish had had the chance to hear you sing? You know, and so one of the regrets that I have that Mom and Dad never got to see that part, you know, and that's where I gained my love, really, of a cappella singing. It was my parents and what they buying Robert Shaw Chorale albums and playing those, and so yeah, it would be wonderful.
And younger brother Paul, who's a general, two-star general. Wouldn't that have been great for them to see?
Yeah.
Here's a shot of Mama. Yeah. This is in Ghana, I believe. She was a missionary nurse, medical nurse.
Yeah.
The siblings.
Yeah.
You're on the left. That's Paul. Next to you, the General Paul, and the Professor Steve, and my wife Martell. Yeah. So that's the clan right there.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what family values or influences did you get from your family that maybe molded you to write the books that you write, you think? I'm interrupting you, I know. Okay. But you had a great family.
Right.
A great family. They weren't rich, but they were a great family.
Right.
But your books sometimes well, you got some abuse in here, you got some sexual tension things going on. That wasn't in your family.
Right.
So how did this come about from the family you grew up in?
Well, first of all, my parents, the life that they lived was a life devoted in service to other people. That's how they lived their life. That's what we saw our whole lives growing up, is that's what was important, is be of service to other people. And so all four of us children, we've done the same thing with our lives. That's what we've tried to do, is be of service to people. And so when I started to write this book, the first book.
And that was Tucker's Way?
Tucker's Way, right.
Okay.
It really began not with the idea of I was going to write a book, but I was just going to write a story, kind of a long story. And it was based on a character that I had created as a part of a online writer's course that I took. And I had to create some kind of a character that would just be a little different, but be real strong, that it would just strike an image in people's minds, as they pictured it. And so I wrote that, created that character, and that character just kind of stayed with me. I just couldn't get this character, Tucker, out of my mind. And I began thinking about what kind of life experiences would create a woman that looked and behaved like that. And so then I drew upon my knowledge and experience as a therapist and stories that I've heard from, scores of people through the years. To get an understanding, I began to understand this woman and to see why she was the way she was. And so I wanted to share her story with people, because Tucker is the kind of woman that you would never want to meet and that you would never want to be friends with.
What did she look like? Can you describe her?
So Tucker, she was probably about 6 feet tall, barrel-chested. Her head was kind of small. She wore men's clothes, men's boots, overalls sometimes. They were too short because she was so tall, and she was very, very poor. She wore glasses, but they were real thick glasses, and they were old and scratched so much that you could barely really see her eyes, actually. And so Tucker, she's a grandmother raising her grandchildren, and she is crusty. She's I don't care if you like me or not kind of a person, but she is a true person, and she is an honest person. There's no pretense about her. You never have to wonder what Tucker's thinking or what she thinks of you. And if you want to know what she thinks of you, you can ask her, and she would tell you flat out what she thought of you. Whether it was good or bad didn't matter. And so that's a quality that, that's kind of lacking sometimes in our interactions with people. And so I decided to try to tell her story. And the way I did it is I wrote 1 chapter a week and put it on my blog. I was thinking about kind of like the old radio serials from back in the 30s.
Is that
and 40s,
tough? 1 chapter a week?
1 chapter a week.
Is that difficult?
It wasn't then.
Okay.
No, it wasn't then. And so people, when I got finished with that, I was finished. And people were talking about how much they enjoyed it. They thought it was just unbelievable. And then they said, so what happened next? And I was like, well, I don't know what did happen next. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, this is just a story. And then, no. So, because you left us hanging here, and so what happened next? So, okay, so maybe I could turn this story into a book. So I broadened it, fleshed it out some and created a book out of it. And then I said, well, I need to do another one to answer those questions. And so I got to doing that, and then I just kind of got on a roll and started writing. And ultimately, there were 5 books in that series.
It didn't start off as a bestseller. You had some lean times, and you
Right.
prayed to God. Tell me about this.
So the way of publishing nowadays is you don't send your manuscript to a publisher. That's not the way it works. You have to get an agent, and then your agent pitches your book to the publishers. And so the way to get an agent is you have to send them a query letter, Query, which I didn't even know what that word meant. I had to look it up and see what it even meant. I don't know what that meant. So I sent, for a year, I sent query letters to all these agents, and all I got back was, thank you, no thanks, won't fit with me, sorry, da-da-da. So I thought, okay, well, what about self-publishing? That was kind of the beginning. So this was 6 years ago, probably. And self-publishing. So I read a couple of books about self-publishing and what that's like and how to do that. And Brenda and I, we had taken on one of our daughters and her 3 young children. They had actually, they had escaped from a very abusive situation. And so there was no other place for them to go to come live with us. And so suddenly, instead of having 2 mouths to feed, we had 6 mouths to feed. And that created an unexpected crunch. And we had hard times. We had hard times with that financially. And so I thought, well, maybe if I write some of these books, maybe that might be the way to help us, supplement the income. All right, so I figured out how to do that, how to self-publish a book, and I launched my books. Sitting back and waiting for the great news, right? This is going to be awesome. So at the end of the first month, I sold 7 books.
There you go.
7 books. I was like, oh, well, 7. Okay, it's going to start slow, we'll see. Okay, all right. So the next month, 12 books. 12. 19 books now, right? Next month, it was 10 or something like that. And that's just kind of the way it was for, 4 months or 5 months, something like that. And so I began praying about that. And I realized that my initial prayer about those books was a very selfish prayer because I was praying about me. I wanted God to do something for me. And I just felt like that was selfish. Not that we shouldn't ask God to help us, but that's just what I felt. I was asking for some kind of financial gain, and maybe that's not what I should be asking for. So then I told God, I said, if people can be blessed by my books, then I hope my books do well, because that's what I want to happen. I want people to be blessed by my books. And the response to that was very dramatic. The next month, I sold 125 books. Next month after that, it was like 300 books. Then it was 700 books. And it was humbling. There were times that Brenda and I, we talked about this, how that the book sales would be such a number, and we would laugh out loud. And we felt like maybe that's what Sarah did when God told her that she was going to have a baby. We criticized her about that. We were laughing about, I can't believe God is just unbelievable. How can He do that? And we would laugh at that. Not, like we didn't appreciate it, but it's just like how unbelievable that it was. And so and so I've continued to pray that prayer since then.
And you're up to 500,000 now?
Right.
Somewhere. And counting.
And counting, right. And, the first books in the Tucker's series, 4 books, they did so well self-publishing that someone called an acquisitions editor from Lake Union, who was a branch of Amazon Publishing. Amazon's the mothership, as I call it. She found my books, and she approached me about Lake Union taking them on and republishing them under their brand. And that was a big step. I didn't know whether I wanted to do that, let go of that. Would God think that I wasn't trusting Him as much anymore, giving somebody else control of all that? But after lots of prayer about that and conversations with Brenda, we decided to do that. And then they really they took off again at just a quantum leap, I guess you'd say, in sales when they did that.
What have the readers What kind of response have you gotten from the readers when they read a book, one of your books? What do they say?
Here's the thing about writing books and getting reviews. You better have a tough skin, okay? Because people can tell you what they think, all right? So sometimes I get a one-star review and people will say, that's it's pitiful. I can't even believe I quit reading it halfway through it. This is drivel, this is childish, blah, blah. But the reviews that meant the most to me, I think about a man. I get emails. I've gotten emails from all over the world because now the internet and the e-books and people read them all over the world. And so I got an email from a man one time, and he said, "I have been in the ministry for 72 years." So then you got to do some math about think how old this gentleman is. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Your books," speaking specifically about the Tucker's books, "your books helped me get over some issues in my life that I've never been able to get over." And so if I never sold any more books than to that one man, then that's worth it for me. Mm-hmm. And I had a school teacher. She wrote me, she taught for an inner school system, and she said, "I never could get my kids interested in reading books until I started reading the Tucker series to them out loud." And I wrote back to her and I said, "I'm really flattered by that, but I've always thought maybe the Tucker's books, the language and the subjects are kind of, they're pretty serious kind of subjects, and I didn't know whether they'd be appropriate." She wrote me back and she said, "I laughed when I saw your response." She said, "You don't know kids very well nowadays, do you?" Mm. She said, "There's nothing in that book that they haven't heard and seen before." Mm-hmm. So.
You talk about the poor being resilient. Tell me about that.
Yeah, one of the things I hoped would happen with my books is that it would cause people to just stop and think again about their view of poor people. We have a lot of built-in prejudices against the poor. We think they're lazy. We think they're trying to live off other people. We think they're second-class citizens, and they should be doing better. They should be doing as well as we are. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted people to see a person in Tucker who she ended up where she did through no fault of her own. This woman suffered horrible abuse as a child. She lived in abject poverty as a child, grew up in it. And then she, at the age 16, she was on her own. Literally. Nobody else but herself. And so she did the best she could. And that's what sometimes poor people do. They do the best they can. They're not doing as well as I am, maybe. Depends on how you want to measure that. But she found a way to build a life. And one of the big things about Tucker is she has a heart that's as big as Texas. Once you get past the outside crust and the toughness and the hardness and the harshness, then you find that she has this really big heart. And a lot of the work that I do now and have for the last 10, 12 years in my counseling practice is with people who are of the lower socioeconomic strata. And so I see them every day trying. They have 3 strikes against them before they ever start. Strikes that I'm going to guess most of us don't have. But they got 3 strikes against them in a lot of ways. But they are still trying to find a way to better themselves, to get their life in better shape, to become somebody different. And so the other part of that is that I hoped that some of my books would inspire people who are like that, who are struggling or just can't find their way or I just don't think I'm ever going to be any different than this. There's no point in this. And I hope that they would be inspired about that. And so I've gotten emails from chaplains in prison who have put my books in prison. Mm-hmm. And there's specifically one, I think about one in a women's prison. And she said, "I can't keep your Tucker's books available enough because the women here read them cover to cover and talk about, well, if Tucker can do it, I can too. And so they feel that there is some inspiration there for their lives, that it can be different for them.
I see Tucker in the image that you have you painted of her. I'd like to hear what she sounds like. Can you read a little bit of Tucker and give you an idea of what she may have sounded like?
I'll give this a shot. I told Larry that one of the interesting things about being a writer I find is not just unique to me, but I've never reread any of my books since I've written them. Once they're published, I don't ever look at them again, ever, because I'm sure I'll find everything in the world wrong with them and think I wish I'd have done it differently, said it differently. So I had to really think about what part I might try to read to you here. So I'm going to try to set this scene for you a little bit. Tucker is raising her 3 grandchildren. All 3 of them have different fathers. The oldest and her daughter, who in the old days we would call her a tramp. Today we might call her a prostitute. And so the oldest boy, he's probably 12, if I remember that right. And he's a mixed race child. And this is in the 70s, so you've got to think about what problems that present for him. The next one is another boy who's a couple of years younger than him. And then there's a young girl. Her name is April. She's 5 years old. And so Tucker has been canning tomatoes in the kitchen. Have you ever had to can tomatoes? Walking back to the stove, she lowers the basket back into the boiling water and picks up the jar of tomato juice on the stove and carefully lowers it into the pot. She continues filling jars with juice and placing them in the pot until it is full. Looking at the clock on the stove, Tucker makes a mental note of the time, retrieves her glass of iced lemonade off the table, and walks back out on the porch, fanning herself with a hand towel. Woo-wee! I don't care if it is the 90s out here. It's cooler out here than it is in that hot kitchen. She lifts the glass to her lips and drains it. And an explosive, appreciative ah is the chaser to her drink. A rumbling down the road catches her attention. Turning to look, she sees the afternoon school bus heading toward her house. I was hoping I'd get done with them tomatoes before they got home. Oh, well. The brakes of the bus squeal as it comes to a stop, and the bus door opens. March, who's the middle boy, bounds off, grinning like a devilish grin, and runs toward the house. August, who's the oldest boy, steps off with a scowl on his face. There's a longer pause, and April, the little girl, appears in the door, hair tousled, cheeks tear-stained. August picks her up and sets her on the ground. Holding her hand, they follow March's trail to the house. Stepping off the porch, Tucker waves down the bus driver as he begins to pull away. He stops the bus and opens the big door. Any trouble, Bailey? She hollers at him. Hey, Tucker, trouble? When is there not trouble with them young'uns? There's just so much I can tolerate, Tucker. You're going to have to do something about that March, boy. At each window of the bus, there are faces peering at Tucker. Some point and laugh. Ignoring the children on the bus, Tucker keeps her attention on Bailey. It ain't my kids what's the problem. It's them other kids picking on them. That's what causes problems. Why don't you do something about that? Not giving him a chance to reply, she turns and joins August and April as they make their way to the house. What happened on the bus, August? Tucker asks. March was shooting paper wads again, August answers tersely. I think he just lives so he can aggravate people. One of these days somebody's going to hurt him, and it just might be me who does it. You know you don't mean that. August kicks at a rock in front of him. Yes, I do. It's bad enough that people make fun of us for how we dress and where we live. The march just brings on more attention, and people hate us. If he would just leave people alone and behave, it'd be a lot better for all 3 of us. How come April's been crying? Johnny Winters started making fun of her and calling her retarded. I pushed him down on the floor and pressed my foot on his hand until he apologized to her, but her feelings was already hurt. That Johnny sounds like he's just like his dad, and his granddad was. Both of them act like they's better than everyone else, when the truth is they ain't better than off of no one. Some people, you just have to learn to ignore. Reaching down, she lifts April into her arms and continues walking. That means you too, April. You have to learn to not always take everything people say to you to heart. You kids need to always believe in yourself if nobody else does. Mart suddenly comes out of the hospital, out of the house, and calls out, "Hey, somebody that ate some of the apple pie. Can we eat the rest of it?" April's eyes open wide and she smiles. August looks at Tucker. "Oh, all right," she says. "Y'all finish it up and play for a little while, then get busy on your chores."
Do you feel like, as you look back on your life, the different jobs you've had, the family you came from, the places you've lived, has brought you to this point in writing this book like this?
I'm sure it has. Sure, yes. You know, I don't think anything happens by accident. But there's a purpose and a design to everything, even if it might be the design of Satan. So we'll throw that in there. But everything is by design. And so all the experiences that I had as a child growing up, living out in the country, living and knowing people, seeing people like Tucker, being around people like that, and then my parents and all the different things that I've had the opportunity to do, the jobs I've had, honestly, you know, I really feel like the most blessed man on the face of the earth. I have got more gifts than most people. And I say that in the most humble way I know how, because that's all about God. I mean, I never wrote a book till I wrote a book. I have a gift of song in me that people would die to have what I have in me. I taught myself how to play guitar. I became a choral director. And so, I mean, I feel like God's given me a gift for being a therapist and working with people. And I think that that principle of the talents, even though it's talking about money in the Bible, that parable that Jesus tells, you know, I've used that God's given me, and when I've used it, next thing I know, there's another one. And I'm like, well, I didn't think I could do that. And so I'm just moved to tears sometimes when I think about how blessed I am with what God has done for me. And that's why I hope that I'm doing what He wants me to do.
One of the many hats you wear, you mentioned, is marriage and family therapist. What is the number one problem that you're experiencing when people come to you for counseling? Or is there a number one problem?
Well, I would say, because the specific work that I've been doing the past 12 years, I'd say, is I've been working with people with addictions very intensely. That's probably 90% of my work right now, is working with people with addictions. And so that's the number one problem they come to see me about now.
And that's in your blog here too,
Yeah.
which I made a copy of. Let me read a little bit of this, and I want you to tell me, do you remember the 4 truths about addiction? Do I have to read these to you?
You better read them too.
Okay. Well, let me read this part. Maybe you'll refresh.
If I'd written it 40 years ago, I'd remember it. But
Yeah.
if it was yesterday, I don't remember it.
Well, it says, first of all, your own family, you have some personal experience with addictions,
Yes.
not yourself necessarily.
Right. Yes, Brent and I have members of our family who have had battle addictions, and we've been able to see some of them overcome their addictions, and some of them still struggle trying to find a way out of that.
But you say here, I know about people with addictions. People with an addiction are some of the kindest, meanest, most truthful, most deceitful, gentlest, cruelest, quietest, loudest, hardest working, laziest, most giving, most selfish, most loving, most heartless, most caring, most uncaring, most humble, most prideful people on the planet, which simply means they are the extreme versions of ourselves, because we all can have any and all those traits in any given time. I guess that's true, huh? Yeah.
I think it's true. I think it's true.
Let me remind you of the truths here.
All right.
Truth number one, if you are struggling with an addiction and are trying to step out of that black, hopeless life, you cannot do it on your own.
Right.
Is that true?
That's very true. That's very true.
People try, though, don't they?
Yes, they do. We all, so I think especially Americans, we have this whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of a mentality. And so you should be, and we even will tell people that. We'll say, just quit. That's all you got to do. Just quit.
Yeah.
You know? And there are probably 1 out of 1,000,000 people that can do that. There are people, the most addictive drug we know anything about actually is nicotine. It's the hardest drug to quit of all the drugs we have is nicotine. And once in a million you have a person who smoked for 30, 40 years and they quit smoking one day and they never pick it up again. But that's 1 in a million.
That's rare.
That's rare.
Truth number two, if someone you love is lost in addiction, you cannot save them. You cannot save them.
That's right. There's nothing you can do to change a person's behavior. We don't have that power. We don't need to have that power. No one needs that kind of power. And so you cannot change them. And so just the act of dealing with them and dealing with what that's like, you can't do that on your own either. You need a really good support system. You may need to see a counselor to help you navigate that difficult passageway.
I said there were 4, there are actually 3. So here's the last one. The face of addiction is the face of your neighbor, your fellow church member, your fellow employee, your boss, your child's school teacher, even yourself. Addiction is no respecter of persons.
It's true. I've seen people from every walk of life
Yeah.
with addictions.
Well, we got a few minutes left here for questions. Anthony is ready with the microphone. Some of you are maybe writing a book and would like to learn how to be a bestseller of your book. Maybe David can give you some advice, or you have some counseling issues in your own family or know of others who might have some questions. Anybody have anything?
While he's going over there too, you know, sometimes people tell me, they'll say, you know, I've got a book I want to write. And I'll say, so how much have you got written so far? Oh, well, I hadn't started yet. I said, then you don't have a book to write. I said, you don't have a book to write. Writers, singers sing, and writers write. You know, we'll say, I want to be a singer. I want to be a singer so bad. So where do you sing now? Oh, I don't sing anywhere now. Well, you don't want to be a singer then. Get busy. If you got a book in you, get busy, start writing.
What do you think is the best source for teaching you how to do online publishing? That's kind of a real muddy water. Where would you go if somebody that needed to learn to do the self-publishing? What's the best tool?
I would send them to Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. Anybody can publish a book. And it won't cost you any more than what it might cost you to get someone to create a book cover for you or to edit your book for you if that's what you want. Anybody, that's why there's millions and millions and millions and millions of books out there now. But that's where I would go because that's who I use. I use Kindle Direct Publishing.
Beyond that, do you have any marketing advice? How do you, once you get it and you just see those little trickling sales, do you have a marketing source that you would recommend?
No. That's the hardest part. Writing the book is easier than marketing your book. And so it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to do that because writers have to be their own press agent. They have to be their own promotional person. They have to be their own, all of that. You have to do all of that. You do your own advertising, figure out where you want to do that. Social media is the way to go to promote your books. And there are so many branches of social media. My recommendation is you pick 2 of them and learn how to do those 2 really, really, really good rather than doing 5 of them just kind of halfway because it takes a lot of time to do that and do it well.
What do you use?
I use Facebook. What I use most of the time is Facebook. And then there is a site called BookBub that is, readers use that to find books, looking for books, and so you can put ads on book, B-O-O-K-B-U-B, BookBub. You can go there and then you can create ads on there if you want to. Advertising programs, run it for a week, a month, something like that. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Which of your gifts gives you the most personal joy?
Which gift gives you the most personal joy?
Being a husband to my wife.
Good answer.
Well, you can go home tonight, can't you?
See, the connection between everything that I do, between, you know, being a choral director, writing books, being a therapist, is having the opportunity to touch somebody's heart. To touch somebody's heart is just the most special thing in the world. To know that you've affected some way, something in someone is the biggest high that you can ever get. And so that's what I want to do with everything that I do. Touch people's hearts, and if you touch a person's heart, then there's going to be an opportunity for God to walk into that opening that you create. Because if you've touched them, then you've softened something somewhere, and it's opened up a little bit somehow. And God can step into that maybe, if He's not already there.
Anybody else? While you're thinking, one of your other blogs here is entitled, and this is from 2012, so you may not remember it. It's what made me who I am today. Does that ring a bell, that title?
The title does, but I don't know what I said.
Okay, well, let me help you.
That's a good title.
It says, I frequently hear people say after they've talked of some horrendous early childhood trauma they've experienced, it's what made me who I am today.
Oh, yeah.
It says, at one time, I agreed with that philosophy. But
Right.
now,
that is not true. Here's what's happened, so common in my counseling practice. Someone who tells me their story, and it involves a lot of horrible abuse and trauma and things like that. And we'll reflect on that a little bit. And then they will say, but that's okay because that's what made me who I am today. And I say, really? Yeah, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I said, okay. Well, then if that's true, then we need to make sure that all children are abused just like you were, and that you abuse and treat your children the same way you were abused so they can turn out to be an awesome person like you. Well, that's not what I'm saying. I said, I know that's not what you mean to say, but that is what you're saying. So what made you if you've been through that experience, those of you watching this and those of you here this evening, if you experienced those kinds of things, but you overcame them, you became a different person, that's because you made a choice. It's how you responded to what happened to you that made you who you are today. And because you chose to overcome it, to step above it, to step beyond it, that's what made you who you are. What happened to you didn't make you who you are. Please. No.
I don't know if you remember this story. It's a rather long story, but maybe you can condense it. It's about when my prejudice was exposed. I remember seeing you playing basketball in high school in Dresden.
Do you really?
Yes, I do. You weren't very good, but I remember seeing you play.
If you saw me on the floor, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Well, it was, the other team was ahead. It was the last minute of the game.
Right. They were usually ahead of us.
But can you condense the story?
Yeah, so 1968, my family moved from Alabama, where we'd been living for about 8 years, and we moved to Tennessee, and I went to a school that was integrated. That's the first time that ever happened. And we were raised not to think differently. My parents weren't prejudiced. Everybody's the same. But I'd never been in school with a black person. And so I went to gym for, I think, first period, second period, whatever, and I went in the locker room. There's a black boy in there changing clothes. What? Changing clothes in here with me? And when I thought that and felt that, I thought, wow, I'm prejudiced and I didn't even know it. I'm prejudiced against, this is exactly what we were taught, that we're all the same, and here you are changing clothes with him, so that boy and I, Eugene McDonald was his name, is his name. And he and I became real good buddies, real good friends, and graduated high school together, and time passed, probably 25 years passed, and I was at a place getting a flat tire fixed on my car one time. And a black man walked in there, white-headed, and he was talking to the owner, and he smiled, and I said, "That's Eugene." I know that smile 100 miles away. And I said, "Are you Eugene McDonald?" He turned around and looked at me. He said, he's kind of lost some of his vision a little bit. He said, that's who I am. Who are you? I said, "I'm David Johnson, but you're going to remember me as Virgil, because that was my nickname in high school." He said, "Virgil, are you Virgil?" I said, yes. We hugged each other. We chatted. I said, "Let me tell you something, Eugene. Let me tell you a story." And I told him that story about what I learned about that. And I said, "I want to tell you how bad I feel about how I felt at that moment in that gym. I want to apologize to you." He just smiled and laughed. He said, "Don't worry about that, Virgil." He said, "That was a long time ago. We both learned a lot since then." And so I wrote this story, and he ended up sharing the story with he wanted to read that story to all of his family, and he sent me a real nice note about that and talked about how his daughters cried when he read it and everything like that. So, it's so easy to think that you know yourself really well until you're put in a situation. You're like, I don't know myself. I didn't know myself at all back then. Thought I did, but I didn't.
Another gift of the Johnsons is storytelling.
Yes. I told you if I started taking off, you got to pull me back in, right?
Thank you, David, for being with us.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Well, Wednesday, August 7th, Stan Overstreet with the Tennessee Mobile Crisis Response Team will be my guest. The team responds to nearly 10,000 phone calls a month from those who are experiencing a mental health crisis. And one aspect of the response team is suicide prevention. In America, one death occurs by suicide every 12 minutes. In Tennessee, over 1,100 teenagers took their lives in the year 2016. That's the last year we have data for. That's Stan Overstreet, August 7th on Stories of Amazing Grace. On a happier note, again, thank you for being with us tonight. And there's a quote in your book that I think kind of fits the close here for the show. This is a fellow named, surprisingly by the name of Moses, I guess was a preacher in a prison. He's talking to Tucker. He says, "You cannot out-sin God's forgiveness." What I believe that means, Tucker, is that God has more forgiveness than you have sins, no matter how many you have or how big you think they are. In the Bible, in 1 John 1:7, it says, "But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, purifies us from sin." I guess my question to you is, watching this show, where are you on that journey of faith? Have you begun the walk yet? And if you're walking, perhaps you're like us and you're falling in some potholes along the way. We hope that our show that we have each month touches your heart, touches your lives by hearing other people's stories of amazing grace. Thank you for being with us.